You were pushed into the spotlight on Britain's Got Talent at the age of 17. When you discovered you had that voice, how old do you believe you were? On Britain's Got Talent in 2012, a 17-year-old boy stunned everyone. The charm was in Jonathan Antoine's voice. However, he hid a secret for 28 years that lay beneath his fame. He was only 4 years old when the bullying began. Children flung snacks at him. Teachers discovered him sobbing by himself. The diagnosis that altered everything then came. Jonathan's situation went beyond his weight or timidity. It was something more profound, something that clarified why he had always felt so odd. His eventual revelation of the truth will shatter your heart. On January 13, 1995, Jonathan Antoine was born in Chigwell, Essex. From the outside, it appeared to be a peaceful, affluent area to grow up. However, things were different inside his realm. Jonathan displayed unusual musical ability from a young age. He possessed perfect pitch by the age of 6, which is something that only roughly 1 in 10,000 people had. Despite the rarity of his gift, nobody took any notice. Rather, Jonathan was so severely harassed during his school days that teachers frequently discovered him sobbing by himself. He used to relax by humming lengthy tunes. Later, his mother, Julie, revealed that he would silently write whole songs in his mind when he was at his worst. By the age of 8, his brain was doing something incredible, despite the fact that he was exhibiting symptoms of despair. After hearing an opera once, he could recall every detail. Later, doctors would diagnose him with musical savant syndrome, a condition that affects less than 1 in 1,000 people. Even early, he struggled with weight. Food became his only source of solace when he was only 4 years old. He was already 40 pounds overweight by the age of 5. He weighed 95 pounds at age 6, which was more than double the typical weight for his age. During lunch, children called him derogatory names and tossed food at him, and he resorted to eating more for solace the more they made fun of him. Jonathan weighed 154 pounds when he was 10 years old. His mom did everything she could to pay for therapy. She even took out 2 mortgages on their home, but nothing seemed to help. He would subsequently be diagnosed by experts with trauma-induced hyperphagia, a disorder that causes excessive weight gain and affects only 2% of bullied children. Nobody was prepared for the moment his voice was heard. At the age of 10, a regular choir audition was being held by Mrs. Williams, a replacement music teacher. Jonathan tried to blend in with the other children, but as soon as he opened his mouth, everyone heard an unreal sound. He sounded like an adult tenor, both in tone and strength. It sounded like Pavarotti trapped in a child's body. Mrs. Williams later remarked. According to an examination of that initial tape, Jonathan's voice could reach a frequency range that is significantly higher than what most kids can handle. His natural vibe too, which typically takes vocalists 20 years to master, was even more unexpected. In a few weeks, he was performing adult-oriented solos. A microphone wasn't necessary for him. With a decibel level of 95, his voice could fill a 2,000-seat auditorium. Later, that incident was referred to as one of the most significant findings in British music education. Jonathan participated in the Stratford and East London Music Festival at the age of 15. He was slightly over 5 feet tall and weighed 298 pounds. He faced 47 other vocalists, many of whom had years of professional training. Victoria Sterling, 17, who had previously performed at the Royal Opera House, was his fiercest opponent. Nessun Dorma was the song Jonathan chose to sing. By the time he was done, about 2,000 individuals had crammed themselves into a 1,200-person capacity. He received a standing ovation from the audience that lasted for over 4 minutes. He received the best score in the festival's history, 98 out of 100, from one of the judges, Sir David Wilcox. He received a recording deal in addition to a $2,500 award. More than that, though, he experienced what it was like to be applauded rather than jeered for the first time. He was admitted into the junior program at the Royal Academy of Music that same year. It was an uncommon occasion. Only 23 were selected from over 2,800 applications. Despite having puked twice before the audition because he was nervous, Jonathan's performance was almost flawless. His voice sounded like it belonged to a 25-year-old who had received training, according to his academy teacher. The school typically cost more than £8,000 a year, but once his mother demonstrated how difficult their financial situation was, the fee was waived. Training took over Jonathan's weekends. 2 hours of performance coaching, 4 hours of theory, and 6 hours of singing technique. Because of his appearance, the other students initially ignored him. However, 3 months later, he was chosen to play the lead part of the magic flute, becoming the youngest person to do so in the Academy's lengthy history. When Jonathan's high school music teacher, Jenny Ewington, took a risk in 2011, everything started to shift. She matched a 16-year-old named Charlotte Giaconelli with a 17-year-old Jonathan, who was still over 20 stone. Jonathan lacked Charlotte's confidence. She enjoyed being in the spotlight and had been acting since she was 8 years old. Jenny wasn't making a guess. She chose Charlotte because she was confident that her commanding stage presence would counterbalance Jonathan's quiet but commanding voice. The prayer they sang in front of only 15 pupils was their debut duet. Jenny, however, felt she had discovered something unique even in that tiny space. Charlotte and Jonathan couldn't have been more different. He spent hours every day practicing opera while avoiding people. By the age of 16, she had been in more than 30 musicals and enjoyed every moment of being on stage. However, their voices harmonized in a way that seemed uncommon when they sang together. Jonathan's voice had a tenor range of C3 to C5. C4 to C6 was the change in Charlotte's soprano voice. They had a voice coupling that only occurs once every generation, according to a music producer who listened to their early recordings. However, things weren't always easy behind the scenes. Jonathan needed continual prodding from Charlotte. Before rehearsals, he would occasionally hide in the school restroom during panic attacks. She would locate him, soothe him, and entice him to return to the music room. They began playing at local gatherings to gain confidence. They performed at 23 locations between February and April 2012, including churches, retirement communities, weddings, and even bars. They received £50 apiece for their first paid work, which was an Easter service at a nearby church. After that, they had a huge moment at a charity dinner at the Epping Forest Country Club, where they performed for 200 people. Talent scouts rushed to them after the 5-minute standing ovation. By April, their performance revenue had reached £300, and 40 additional locations were eager to hire them. The prayer remained as the center of each performance, even though their song list had expanded to 15 songs. Jonathan was more prepared for what was to happen thanks to these little performances. Charlotte was the one who insisted that they try out for Britain's Got Talent. When she first learned about the tryouts in March 2012, Jonathan initially turned her down. He didn't want to appear on national television and have his appearance ridiculed. Charlotte persevered. She asked for 3 weeks. She even promised that if he didn't agree, she would try out by herself. She turned in their application 13 minutes before the deadline. Her bedroom was used to record the video. Jonathan appeared frightened and seldom appeared on film. Charlotte told the producers that it was either both or neither when they called, indicating that they were solely interested in her. The London Palladium planned to host the audition on April 28. Charlotte stayed at Jonathan's house the night before to ensure he wouldn't abandon him because he had never even used public transportation by himself. Jonathan Antoine had no idea that his life would alter forever when he took the stage at Britain's Got Talent in 2012. He was just 17. He had disheveled hair, wore a plain t-shirt, and didn't resemble the entertainers who typically won over the judges. Millions would be stunned by what transpired next. Simon Cowell turned to fellow judge Carmen Electra and said something nasty before Jonathan had even sang a word. "Just when you think it can't get any worse," he said. That remark was captured on camera. It was cruel, and that was solely based on Jonathan's appearance. Jonathan, however, anticipated it. One of the most memorable pre-performance video in BGT history was when he subsequently remarked, "I don't look like a standard performer, I just went out there in my normal clothes." The song The Prayer followed. Andrea Belli and Celine Dion made a strong duet renowned. It was not Jonathan's choice. He and his singing partner Charlotte Giaconelli were invited to perform it at Jeanette Brown's wedding by his music instructor. The whole atmosphere shifted as Jonathan started singing. The audience stood up in a matter of seconds. People were in tears. Simon Cowell's mouth fell open. They received yes votes from all 4 judges. It was more than just an excellent performance. It was revolutionary. Simon's subsequent response stunned everyone even more. Jonathan was being compared to Luciano Pavarotti by the same individual who had made fun of him just moments earlier. "You're a future star," he said. Experts supported him. Even at his age, Jonathan's voice was already displaying vocal maturity. He possessed the range and control of a person twice his age, they added. The performance went viral very fast. On March 24, 2012, the audition video was posted online. It received over 2.6 million views in a few of weeks. It quickly rose to the top of the global TV audition viewership rankings. It was covered by international media. People started seeing parallels between Jonathan and Susan Bull. Pastor Vi Bolsham and other religious leaders shared the video and referred to it as a fantastic narrative. Overnight, Jonathan went from being a bullied teenager to a global celebrity, but the path was not without its challenges. Jonathan had a difficult past. He weighed 280 pounds and had endured years of bullying. He once became a recluse after having a nervous breakdown in school. Tracy, his mother, claimed that he would never leave the house and would hide under a large sweater. Therefore, it was more than simply a show when he took the stage at BGT. It was a triumph. The pressure continued after that. Jonathan had to suppress his nervousness in order to remain composed during the semi-finals. Charlotte was also in a panic. Jonathan, however, had mastered breathing techniques to manage his anxiety. To balance himself before singing, he had to sit down. The audience was once again won over by their rendition of Caruso. Even Simon Cowell said at that time that they were his favorite act of the entire performance. Still, controversy erupted once more. Everyone was taken aback when Simon advised Jonathan to leave Charlotte and go it alone. Jonathan made no hesitation at all. He declined. "We've come on here as a duo, and we're going to stay here as a duo," he stated. He gained even more respect after that incident. They were predicted to win the final, but the outcome dashed their expectations. With 39% of the public vote, Ashley Butler and her dog Pudsey won first place. With 25.8%, Jonathan and Charlotte came in second. It was quite unexpected. Their admirers were devastated. Many believed that popularity now mattered more than talent. Simon Cowell wasted no time. He signed Jonathan and Charlotte to a record-breaking £11 million contract the day after the finale. That September saw the publication of their debut album Together, which peaked at number 10 on the UK albums list. Simon meticulously scheduled the release to coincide with the live performances of the X Factor. He was aware that they needed to attack while their performance was still fresh in his mind. Jonathan gasped. "The fact that we are actually creating our own CD still amazes me." He claimed that the CD included the hits that had brought them fame, such as Caruso and The Prayer. More than 250,000 copies were sold. Their album was as beautiful as Simon had predicted. Perhaps Love, their second album, was released a year later. On October 14, 2013, it was released similar to their first. In the UK, it peaked at number 5. However, something had changed. The album featured more contemporary versions, in addition to classical tunes. That change exposed a more serious issue. Charlotte and Jonathan had different desires. Serious classical music and opera drew Jonathan in. Charlotte had a preference for more contemporary forms, including musical theater. Their disparities became too great to overlook. Jonathan had spent years studying classical music. In 2010, he even won the title of Young Musician of the Year at a local event. On the other hand, Charlotte had experience in theater. Although they struggled behind the scenes, their second record was a success. They declared their separation at the beginning of 2014. Both of them made an effort to remain upbeat. In their joint statement, they expressed their excitement about returning to the recording studio. However, insiders disclosed that months of disagreements over song selections and creative direction led to the breakup. Jonathan had also suffered from touring. His condition was already precarious. He had always had issues with his confidence and weight. According to his mother, he refused to go outside prior to BGT. Following the performance, he was pushed to the limit by the demands of appearances, concerts, and media interviews. Jonathan began experiencing panic attacks. Jonathan and Charlotte remained a team for 2 years. More than 250,000 albums were sold by them. In the UK charts, their debut album together peaked at number 5. Fans, however, were taken aback in February 2014. There was an internet post. They were parting ways. Behind the scenes, Sony had made them an unprecedented offer, simultaneous solo contracts for both. An offer like that hardly ever occurs. Jonathan's CD would be released in October, and Charlotte's in June. The unified statement attempted to mitigate the impact. They had a remarkable journey together, having met in high school in 2006, but it was obvious that their paths were diverging. Quick. The meeting with Sony to prepare their third album was the true turning moment. They couldn't agree on anything, according to Charlotte afterward. Not the vision, not the tunes, nor the tone. Jonathan desired to learn more about classical opera. Charlotte had a preference for musical theater. There was a real split. Why not go solo? Sony asked, and a month later, they had decided. Charlotte didn't take her time. Her debut solo album, Solitaire, was released in July 2014. Additionally, she has already made her stage debut at London's Landor Theatre by February 2015. In the Broadway classic She Loves Me, she played Amelia Balash. The performance took place between February 4th and March 7th. This was more than just a job decision for her. It was a change. Night after night, she was performing live on stage, doing what she loved. Jonathan had a quite different experience. He did not leap confidently in. He was terrified. He wasn't sure if he could accomplish it alone, at the age of 19. The one with stage presence had always been Charlotte. She gave him courage. He had to discover it on his own now. They had achieved enormous success. More than 200,000 albums had been sold globally. A position in the top 10 of the Billboard Classical Crossover rankings. The expectations were depressing. He took a long step back. He practiced. He recovered. He made an effort to recall his original motivation for loving music. The split wasn't warmly received by fans. But the headlines were brutal. It was painful to read. She dumps him. As a couple, they had captured the hearts of many. They had no intention of letting go. The solo transactions were endorsed by certain industry insiders. Others were concerned that it was premature. In October 2013, their second album, Perhaps Love, has recently been released in the United States. It didn't feel like the end, it felt like the beginning. Jonathan wasn't done though. He published Tenera, a serious opera with 12 classical tracks, in October 2014. On the official classical artist album list, the album peaked at number 1. He was the youngest tenor to ever reach the top of that list at the age of 19. The album's ascent to number 13 on the UK pop chart was even more unexpected. It was a breakthrough. He was controlling, not just getting by on his own. There was one particular instance that year. Jonathan was asked to perform as a special guest of one of the greatest tenors in history.
Placio Domingo, at the London iTunes Festival. It was a sign that Jonathan had come, in a moment of respect. By 2020, Jonathan embarked on his most ambitious endeavor to date, a concept album. On June 5th, Going the Distance was launched. It took 3 years to finish. A collaboration with Grammy winner Greg Field and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. This album wasn't your typical one. The 3 acts of the narrative were based on Jonathan's personal trip. He sang Nessun Dorma, the aria that made Pavarotti famous, for the first time. Finally, on March 15th, a concert special was broadcast on PBS, complete chorus and orchestra. At the age of 25, Jonathan had become into the performer that people had previously only dreamed he could be. He then shocked everyone once more in 2024. This time, it's the 8 tracks in Book 1 of Diane Warren's Song by Request, which is only 33 minutes long. A partnership with Diane Warren, one of the most well-known figures in pop music. In addition to Jonathan, she has written for Lady Gaga, Aerosmith, and Celine Dion. Jonathan Antoine was only 17 years old in 2012 when he appeared on the stage of Britain's Got Talent. Overweight, shy and trembling with anxiety. What followed was unexpected. The world was astounded by his voice. He was more than a singer. He took off. His life was revolutionized by that one performance. However, the audience was never privy to the profound bewilderment and hidden struggles he had endured for years. Furthermore, it would be over 10 years before the truth was revealed. Jonathan revealed something he had never previously disclosed to the public in an interview conducted in Australia at the beginning of 2023. An autism diagnosis had been made for him. In late 2022, just after turning 27, he received the news. It was like a daydream to him. It was a shock to those closest to him. Nobody had suspected it. Not when he became famous. Not after 5 albums that were successful. Not while he was performing all over the world. However, the diagnosis clarified everything. All of a sudden, there was a reason for years of mental anguish, social anxiety, and perplexity. It was not a justification. Clarity was the key. In honor of World Autism Awareness Day that year, he sent a statement on Instagram. He wrote on how his self-perception was altered by the diagnosis. Although he acknowledged that it was frightening, he also described it as freeing. Jonathan had been dealing with incomprehensible difficulties for 28 years. He battled feelings that seemed excessively large. After the interviews, he felt exhausted. He struggled with ongoing criticism and pressure, particularly following his unexpected rise to stardom. He had been living in silence with undiagnosed autism while all of this was going on. His public admission sparked an instantaneous and powerful response. His voice faltered as he acknowledged that this was the first time he had discussed it in public during that same interview. He clarified that it was a relief to have an explanation for all those trying times. Life had felt much more difficult because of the prolonged ignorance. He was straightforward in his statement. He felt as though he had been in the dark for 28 years.